Hello, my name is Scott Hicks. I'm director of the Teaching and Learning Center at UNC Pembroke. For today's celebration of teaching and learning, I'm joined by Phillip McRae, adjunct in the School of Business teaching business law. Mr. McRae, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the chance to get to talk to you.
We're glad to talk to you. Who is the best teacher you've ever had and why?
Well, I have been thinking about that for about a week, and it's a lot tougher question than it would first appear. I look at my elementary school, junior high, high school, college, and then graduate school. And, I've had a lot of good teachers, but I understand you're focusing on higher learning. So I'm going to stick with, the college level, but I've got some good ones otherwise too. I was a student at a little college in southeastern North Carolina called Pembroke State University back in the 1970s, and we had just reached 1,000 students, and there were so many students they didn't know where to put them all. There were so many, and but they, for some reason, they were able to capture a fantastic group of professors, and I had several of them, and I look at the ones I had when I was in school there during the early to mid 70s, and there's people like Dr. Che in the political science department, Dr. Iliades in the history department, of which I graduated with a degree in history. He wrote a book with Adolph Dial about the Lumbees that everybody knows about. Great book, great people that wrote it, very smart. But there's one professor I had there at Pembroke, which is now UNC Pembroke, if you haven't figured that out yet. I had a professor named Dr. Paul Hemus. He was Greek. And it's really odd. I sat here and thought about it. I couldn't even remember what course he taught. I can't remember the subject matter. And looking back on it and thinking about it, I finally realized it must have been the English department because I was writing papers for him. But this guy was really smart, and he had some of the characteristics that I think are good with professors. And while I'm on the subject, I'd like to mention another professor who I never had. My wife had him. She talked about him all the time. His name was Shelby Stevenson. And he, a few years ago, he was the poet laureate of the state of North Carolina. And I finally met him about 10 years ago. And I stood there, I watched a presentation he made down at Robinson Community College. And I said to myself, I could have been an English major. He has that kind of influence on you. And Dr. Paul Hemus had the same kind of effect on people. So since I never had Shelby Stevenson, I'm going to stick with Dr. Paul Hemus.
Wonderful faculty. What does it take to be a good professor in higher education in 2021?
Well, the one thing I shared, I think that most of the professors I've had and teachers, whether you want to call them professors or not, they all have a common characteristic, I think, and that is they're still learning too. And, you don't want to get to the point to where you're buddies with your students. You don't want to be creepy about it. You don't want to get too close. You've got to maintain that relationship of, a student versus a professor. But you've got to be empathetic with the kids. You have to see it the way they're seeing it. And Dr. Iliades, Dr. Iliades, Dr. Che, Dr. Paul Hemus, Shelby Stevenson. I can remember Shelby Stevenson say down at the presentation I saw him at, he was introduced by one of his former students, gave a fantastic introduction, and you thought he was describing this guy 10 feet tall. And he, but when the program was over, I remember Dr. Stevenson said, "You know what? I don't remember teaching you anything, but I learned a lot from you." And that to me, that's how the best professors are. They're still learning, and they're using you to learn more. They're finding out, well, what are you seeing? And I bet you they stumble across things that they had never thought about. And I don't know how you do that every time with every student, but to be able to identify with someone and be on the same trip that they're on, to me, I like that. And that's a good characteristic for a professor to have.
I
So,
agree. So tell us a story about something you do to engage your students.
well, I'm probably not the best one to ask, but going back to the same theme I just talked about, I had another friend of mine that was a scoutmaster with me, and he had a theory that nobody's ever going to learn anything by their mistakes if you don't let them make mistakes. So you have to give them opportunities to mess everything up, and then the next time they do it, they'll understand. They will have learned. Let's avoid that. Edison used to say, when I fail, I don't look at it as a failure. I learned that this isn't going to work. You turn it into a positive. And so one thing recently I gave my kids an example. We were studying contracts, and contracts is something you do every day of almost of your life. But I've got kids out there saying, I don't know what a contract is, and they're scared of it. It's this mysterious thing. And the fact of the matter is, if you've gone to UNC Pembroke bookstore and bought a Pepsi-Cola, you've entered into a contract. So, I gave them an assignment. What was the last contract you entered into? And then I got them to tell me what the elements are. What was the offer? What was the acceptance? What did you end up agreeing on? What was the consideration or the thing of value that, both sides got and both sides gave? Was it legal? Did both parties have capacity? And, I couched it in terms to where they're, what does anybody like to talk about the most? Themselves. And so I was able to let them tell me about themselves using the material that we were learning in class. And, and I discovered some of them didn't have a good grasp on it. But now that they've made the mistake, I can show them how to correct it. And hopefully they'll end up, learning this material and keeping it with them for the rest of their life. So I don't know if that's anything exactly brilliant, but that's what we did here recently.
That's a wonderful strategy. Thank you for joining us today.
Dr. Hicks, I appreciate it. If you need anything over here at the courthouse in Laurinburg or while I'm down on campus, don't be bashful.
I appreciate it. And come by and see us.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.